In the minds of some, universal salvation is a heretical idea that was imported into Christianity from pagan philosophies by Origen, sometime in the 3rd century. Ilaria Ramelli argues that this picture is completely mistaken. She maintains that Christian theologians were the first people to proclaim that all will be saved, and their reasons for doing so were rooted in their faith in Christ. She demonstrates that, in fact, the idea of the final restoration of all creation, apocatastasis, or apocatastasis, however you want to pronounce it, was grounded upon the teachings of the Bible and the church's beliefs about Jesus' total triumph over sin, death, and evil through his incarnation, crucifixion, resurrection, and ascension. Ramelli traces the Christian roots of Origen's teachings on apocatastasis. She argues that he was drawing on texts from Scripture and from various Christians who preceded him. Theologians such as Bardazian, Irenaeus, Clement. She outlines Origen's often misunderstood theology in some detail and then follows the legacy of his Christian universalism through the centuries that followed. We are treated to explorations of Origenian universal salvation in a host of Christian disciples, including Athanasius, Didymus the Blind, the Cappadocian Fathers, Evagrius, Maximus the Confessor, John Scotus Erigena, and Julian of Norwich. Welcome back to the Undeserved Flavor. So, today I'm going to be starting a new playlist. I was talking about starting a new playlist before called A Case for Christian Universalism. This video will fall into that playlist, under that category, but it's going to be in a playlist of its own. This book, A Larger Hope by Ilaria Ramelli, Universal Salvation from Christian Beginnings to Julian of Norwich, is not available as an audiobook anywhere on the internet from my experience. And I know a lot of people are not going to want to go out of their way to buy a book, much less a large book that is kind of more on the scholarly or academic level. It's a lot easier to listen to it, especially if it's free. I have a hard time reading books because I don't have time. I have a lot of books. I will browse them. I'll get a few chapters in. I'll pick them apart here and there. But I usually do not have the time to read through a book. I have 4 kids. I'm self-employed. I run a business. I do not have a lot of time to read unless I'm reading my kids a bedtime story or creating videos like this for you. So this is going to help us out, you and I alike, in that I'm going to actually get through a book, and you're going to come along for the ride. Now, this may be a little on the boring side. You may not like tuning into a video and just watching somebody read. If you do have YouTube Premium, where you pay like whatever it is, $12, $13 a month, you can actually set it to play in the background. So you can actually turn your phone screen off, put it in your standard like sleep mode or whatever it is, when you set it down, have your earbuds going or headphones and listen, just like you can do with like Pandora. But if you're not subscribed to YouTube Premium, this is not a plug for YouTube. I'm not getting paid by any means. I'm not monetized at all. I don't have any sponsors. This is all 100% pro bono. But I'm just making a suggestion because that is how I get a lot of listening done on whatever content is available on YouTube. So that may make it easier for you to get through this playlist while I read this book. And then following this little project, I'm going to be reading maybe a couple other books that are not on any form of audio format, not in any form of audio format anywhere on the internet. such as Universalism, the prevailing doctrine of the Christian church in its first 500 years by John Wesley Hanson, originally published in 1899. That's a good one. I've read some of that already on this channel. I'm thinking I'll put that one in a playlist as well where I read the whole book to you. Let's just hope I personally can survive this task. It's probably not going to be completed overnight. So if you'd like me to step up my game and get a little bit more done, a little bit more often, if I'm putting videos up with, weeks or months in between the next one, because I have too much going on, if I start seeing people commenting, saying, hey, where's the next video? I want more of this. Obviously, that's going to kick my butt in gear to get another one out. I don't know if that's going to be the case. I can't predict the future. I'm going to try and get these out as quick as possible. But I have a lot going on. So if you're interested in hearing more of this book after I read, the first bit of it today, I plan on basically just kind of giving you a brief introduction today. I honestly don't even know if I'm going to get into chapter 1. I'm going to try. We'll see what kind of time I have. But obviously you have the preface and the introduction. Things like that. Normally, if you were reading a book yourself, oftentimes people will skip those. But I think in a book like this, it is really helpful to include that in audio format. Or if you're brand new to the channel, or if you're for whatever reason you're checking out this playlist, it's obviously a good introduction to the playlist, to the topic, to the book, to hear the preface. I'm not going to read the foreword. That is not necessary. I already read that. It's not necessary. So let's start with a little bit of table of contents. So this book is, first of all, a total of just shy of 300 pages, 285 pages. A good chunk of that is the sources and whatever you call that at the end of a book. Bibliography. That's the word I was thinking of. I was trying to say that the other day. I couldn't think of the word. But yeah, so the last 30 pages of it are bibliography. So obviously I am not going to be reading the bibliography. That would be super boring. It'd be like reading, what is it in the Bible, the Chronicles or whatever, generational line. Who reads that? Does anybody? Do you read that? I get it if you're trying to do a Bible in a year or whatever. You're trying to actually read the whole Bible without cheating, and then you got to read all that unnecessary stuff. But I guess it's necessary for certain contexts. But all right, I'm going to be done rambling now. And we're going to get into the foreword of this book, and I'm going to try and stay on task for this playlist. That said, you're on the Undeserved Flavor channel. At some point, my opinion is going to happen. It's going to come up. So, stick around. Foreword. I'm not going to read the foreword. Already said that. Gotcha. Preface. No being will remain outside the number of the saved. Saint Gregory of Nyssa on 1 Corinthians 15:28. Downing 21. The present book addresses a general learned readership, pastors, students, graduates and undergraduates, and other interested Christians, for all references to original texts, often in extensive quotations, and to scholarship reading the sections from the New Testament to John the Scot of Eurigena, approximately the first Christian millennium, as well as a much more detailed treatment. I refer to The Doctrine of Apocatastasis, a critical assessment. Actually, it's the Christian doctrine of the apocatastasis. A critical assessment from the New Testament to Eurigena. I may be mispronouncing that name. Regina. It's a very substantial 1,000-page scientific monograph aimed at scholars, academic specialists, and postgraduate students, which, much to my comfort, after an intense labor of 16 years, has received excellent reviews. Example, by Anthony Meredith in the International Journal of Platonic Tradition, Mark Edwards in the Journal of Theological Studies, Johannes von Oort, probably mispronounced that name, in Vigile Christiane. I'm just going to stop saying I probably mispronounced that because I'm probably going to mispronounce like 9 out of 10 names, so whatever. Stephen Neames, Fuller Theological Seminary, in the Journal of Analytic Theology. Robin A. Perry in the International Journal of Systematic Theology. And Chris L. DeWitt in the Journal of Early Christian History. Abstracts of all of these reviews are available at www.brill.com/Christian Doctrine Apocatastasis. And I'm not going to read the next website. We're going in. Yeah. It's about $350, $353 on Amazon last time I checked. Christian Doctrine of Apocatastasis. If you're looking for an academic, scholarly work, it is about 1,000 pages, as we just read. And it is going to be the most complete and exhaustive case for Christian universalism under the sun, put together in modern times. It will be followed in due course, God willing, by 2 other scholarly monographs. One on non-Christian and pre-Christian philosophical concepts of apocatastasis, which means ultimate restoration. From ancient philosophy to late antique Platonism, Proclus Damascus, and another on the political, theological, pastoral, ecclesiastical, social, historical, and even linguistic causes for the rejection of the doctrine of apocatastasis, or universal restoration. In late antiquity, by the Church of the Empire, quote-unquote, mainly under the influence of Justinian in the East and Augustine in the West. In tradition to my monograph on apocatastasis, see Brian Daly, The Hope of the Early Church, and a Handbook of Patristic Eschatology, and Brian Daly, Eschatology and the Early Church Fathers. In the Oxford Handbook of Eschatology, on page 7 of the online edition, Daly remarked, a few general studies exist of the broader shape and development of early Christian hope concerning the end of this present history and the beginning of God's kingdom. My monograph, The Christian Doctrine of Apocatastasis, and the present book contribute to filling this persistent scholarly gap. It is helpful to read this monograph and the present book together with my invited response to Michael McClymon's critique in Theological Studies. Boring so far, but hey, it'll get better. We're still in the preface. For the Christian doctrine of universal salvation in more times, you know what? If you're one of those guys following this channel, or at least peeking in here to see something about Christian universalism, to see if we have any ground to stand on, that's what you're getting here, okay? You don't need to throw in the comments, well, I've been studying the early church for 20 years. Name a source. Well, here we go. Here's a source. Here's a pile of sources. And a solid presentation of the sources. Back to the book. For the Christian doctrine of universal salvation in more recent times, besides the present volume, which addresses also the span of the time of Regina to Meister Eckhart and Julian of Norwich, absent from the Christian doctrine of apocatastasis, I refer readers to Robin Perry and Christopher Partridge's Universal Salvation, The Current Debate, and Gregory MacDonald, All Shall Be Well, Explorations in Universal Salvation and Christian Theology from Origen to Moltmann. A concise but rigorous handbook of patristic eschatology is offered by Brian Daly. The Hope of the Early Church, mentioned above. A short survey on patristic universalism was provided by Thomas Allen in 1885. See now the annotated edition, Thomas Allen. Christ Triumphant. Universalism asserted as the hope of the gospel on the authority of reason, the Fathers, and the Holy Scripture. I look forward to David Bentley Hart's constructive book on universalism. I'm pretty sure she's alluding to That All Shall Be Saved. It's a fun one. Still recording? Yep. Okay, good. Experimenting a little bit with camera settings, so yeah, I hope I don't have to toss this whole recording in the trash. In the present book, I do not merely summarize the content of the Christian doctrine of apocatastasis, but also add many new sections that were absent from the larger volume. For example, on annihilationism, some apocrypha, Hilary of Poitiers, Basil of Caesarea, Macarius of Magnesia, Apherhat, Barsanaphius, Theophylact, Meister Eckhart, the appendix on the terminology of eternity, and all the last section from Eurygena to Julian of Norwich. Furthermore, I have added various new texts, proofs, and arguments concerning a number of theologians, from Clement to Eusebius to Basil of Caesarea, from Ambrose to Marius Victorinus to Maximus the Confessor, from Gregory of Nazianzus and Diodore of Tarsus to Titus of Basra, and Eurygena and more, which were not included in the 2013 monograph. So I hope that not even those who have read the Christian doctrine of apocatastasis will find new material here that will be of interest. In collaboration with David Constan, I wrote a monograph some 10 years ago about the Greek words aionios and aodios, titled Terms for Eternity. Given the significance of the word aionios in discussions about universal salvation in the Bible, and in the early church that the early study has predictably proven important in the preparation of my apocatastasis monograph. Given this importance, the main findings of that extensive research are briefly summarized in an appendix at the end of this book. This book is the first of a projected series of 3 books on the doctrine of universal salvation. In the second book, A Larger Hope from the Reformation to the 19th Century, Robin Perry, with some contributions from me, will pick up the story in its mainly Protestant streams. The third volume, which will be co-authored, shall trace the significant developments in the shape and fortunes of the idea in the 20th and 21st centuries. We hope that these books taken together will provide a helpful and reliable source for those wishing to explore an often forgotten stream in the history of the Christian tradition. That concludes the preface. So yes, Robin Perry did put out that second book. I don't know if the third one is out yet. It may or may not be. I just haven't looked into it. Haven't even gotten through the first one yet. This has been out for a few years now. I think 2019, 20? No, this one, 2021. No, it's copyright 2019. I could have swore this. I don't know. I guess time flies. Anyway, so should I do the acknowledgements? No, we don't need to do that. Abbreviations, obviously, we don't need to do that. You will go straight to sleep. I'm not going to sit here and basically read a thesaurus or a dictionary. All right. Let's get into it. By way of introduction, quote, I do not think that the reign of death is eternal, as that of life and justice is, especially as I hear it from the apostle that the last enemy, death, must be destroyed. 1 Corinthians 15:24. For should one suppose that death is eternal, as life is, death will no longer be the contradictory of life, but equal to it. For, quote, eternal is not the contradictory of eternal, but the same thing. Now it is certain that death is the contradictory of life. Therefore, it is certain that if life is eternal, death cannot possibly be eternal. Once the death of the soul, which is, quote unquote, the last enemy, has been destroyed, the kingdom of death, together with death itself, will finally be wiped away. Origin of Alexandria. Commentary on Romans 5:7. Universal salvation and Greek restoration. Apocatastasis. Origin of Alexandria, around 255. The greatest Christian actually, I think 255 is when he died. The greatest Christian philosopher, theologian, and exegete of the patristic era, is regarded as the founder of the doctrine of universal salvation. He embedded it in his theory. Remember, you're not paying for this book on Audible. You didn't purchase this download. So I don't want to hear it in comments. You need to brush up on your reading. You're getting this for free, okay? Now you want to start sending me a check every month to do this kind of stuff for you, I'll start working on my skills. But I ain't asking for that. Don't send me a check. You don't even know where to send it. Hush. He embedded it in his theory of apocatastasis, or restoration of all rational creatures, to the good, i.e. God, their creator. However, as I will show, he had important antecedents, such as Bardasian of Edessa and Clement of Alexandria, as well as some apocryphal writings, and especially the Bible, of which Origen was the utmost Christian exegete. He himself declares that there was a tradition behind him when he refers apocatastasis to the universal restoration. Quote, the end, telos, is the so-called apocatastasis. If it's bothering you that I'm saying apocatastasis as opposed to apocatastasis, as some call it, drop it in the comments. Let me know if I'm saying it right or wrong, or if it's bothering you, or if it doesn't matter. Thanks. The end, telos, is the so-called apocatastasis, because then no enemy will remain. If it is the case that the Christ must reign until he has put all enemies under his feet, but the last enemy will be destroyed, death. The words, the so-called apocatastasis, indicate that Origen is referring to an already existent tradition. And this was not a tradition that only possessed the concept of universal salvation, but not the word apocatastasis, such as Apocalypse of Peter, but rather texts that contained both the concept and very term apocatastasis, such as those of Clement, which Origen knew, but also a biblical passage, Acts 3:21. The Greek term apocatastasis basically indicates a restoration, reconstitution, return to an original condition. It is attested in classical and Hellenistic Greek literature long before Christianity, and also has technical meanings. For instance, in a medical sense, it designates the recovery of health. In a political sense, the return of a hostage to his homeland. Or in a political restoration, in a military sense, it's an inversion maneuver. In a physical sense, the reestablishment of atoms after a collision. In astronomy, the apocatastasis of a heavenly body was its return to its original position, or zodiacal revolution. Zodiacal. I don't know if you say it any different than that. Or the return of the sun and the moon to visibility after an eclipse. Apocatastasis was also a philosophical term, especially in Stoic cosmology. There, it indicated the periodical return of the universe to its original condition. In a cosmic cycle, Stoic cosmology was articulated in aeons, or great years, that succeeded one another. Each of these aeons is identical, or almost identical, to all others, with the same events, the same people, and their same behaviors. The sequence of aeons continues forever. The end of an aeon is determined by a conflagration in which everything is resolved into the fire, aether, logos, reason, pneuma, breath, wind, that coincides with the supreme divinity, Zeus, Jupiter. The latter each time initiates a new expansion into the cosmos. Origen knew the Stoic doctrine of aeons and apocatastasis very well, but the Stoic aeons are very different from those of Origen. Indeed, Origen explicitly criticized the Stoic conception for two main reasons. One, it destroyed human free will by maintaining that everything that happens is repeated again and again and again by necessity. And two, by positing an infinity of the sequences of aeons, it does not imply an end, or telos, to which all of history points, and for which Origen is universal salvation. The fact that there is an end, but a senseless eternal repetition. Origen himself explains the basic meaning of apocatastasis, someone's return or restoration to a condition that is proper and original to him or her. He illustrates this general meaning by means of some specific examples. The medical, therapeutic meaning of the resetting of a limb into its place after displacement. The political meaning of the reintegration of an exile, or the military meaning of a readmission of a soldier into a unit from which he had been chased away. All of these meanings can metaphorically be applied to the final restoration of all human beings, or all rational creatures, to God. To God. I like what I did there. Apocatastasis in Hellenistic Judaism and the Greek Bible. Hellenistic Judaism and Philo. The term apocatastasis is attested in Hellenistic Judaism, especially in Alexandria, in works that were well known to Clement of Alexandria and Origen. The correlate verb, I'm not going to read that Greek word because I can't read Greek, to restore, is found in the Septuagint, the Hellenistic Greek translation of the Hebrew Bible, and both the verb and the noun, apocatastasis, are attested in the New Testament. The letter of Aristeas 123:4 attests to the political meaning of apocatastasis. Philo of Alexandria, the main representative of Hellenistic Judaism, at the end of the 1st century BC, and the beginning of the 1st AD uses apocatastasis to indicate the periodical restitution of land to its owners. A similar sense is attested in the late 1st century AD by Flavius Josephus in reference to the restoration of the Hebrews to their land. Philo refers apocatastasis to the liberation of the Hebrews from Egypt as an allegory of the restoration of the soul. Genesis 15:16. At the 4th generation they will return here, was said not only to indicate the time in which they will inhabit the Holy Land, but also to present the perfect restoration, apocatastasis, of the soul. This is the return of the soul to its original condition, without sin. The same meaning of apocatastasis is found in Clement of Alexandria, who was well acquainted with Philo's thought, and in some Gnostic texts, but, unlike Clement of Origen, neither Philo nor most of his Gnostics had a notion of apocatastasis that entailed a belief in universal salvation or bodily resurrection. So don't get them mixed up. Just because they're using the same word doesn't mean it's in the same context. In the Septuagint, the Greek translation of the Hebrew Bible that stems from a Jewish Hellenistic context, the noun apocatastasis, aka restoration, is lacking. However, the correspondent verb to restore is present, and the subject is always God. It is God who restores. In Exodus 14:26-27, God restores the water, having it flow again so as to submerge the Egyptians. In Leviticus 13:16, the meaning is therapeutic, as it will be in the Gospels. In a theological passive, God restores the skin of a leper to health. In Job 5:8, God is said to have a person suffer, but then to restore her again. Origen will take this statement as a reference to the eventual universal restoration at the end of purifying sufferings for sinners. God will restore the life of the righteous who suffers. Job 8:6, 22:28, 33:25. In Psalm 34:17, God restores the life of a person in anguish, saving the person from evil. In Isaiah 23:17, God will reconstitute Tyre to its ancient state of prosperity. In Jeremiah 15:19, God will restore Israel if Israel returns to God and repents. Origen will see here too a reference to the eventual apocatastasis. In Jeremiah 16:15, 23:8, and 27:19, God will restore Israel to the land of its forefathers. In Ezekiel 16:55, God will restore Sodom and Gomorrah to their original condition prior to their destruction. This too was read by patristic exegetes as a reference to the mystery of universal restoration and salvation. The Greek New Testament. In the New Testament, apart from Matthew 17:11, Mark 9:12, and Acts 3:21, to which I shall return below in chapter 1, there are several occurrences of the verb to restore related to apocatastasis, and these are all rendered in the Latin translation of the Vulgate with restituo. It is notable that, consistently with the Old Testament use, the subject of the action of restoration is always God or Christ. In 4 cases in the Gospels, it is Jesus who restores someone to health. Matthew 12:13, Mark 3:5, 8:25, Luke 6:10. Jesus, by performing these healing acts, shows God's therapeutic and restoring power. This power works both on the body and the soul. Gregory of Nyssa will especially point out in his holistic conception of resurrection, anastasis, apocatastasis. Both body and soul will be restored by God to their original prelapsarian integrity. In the rest of the New Testament, the verb to restore related to apocatastasis appears in Acts 1:16, in Hebrews 13:19. The subject of the action of restoration being again God. In Acts 1:16, the disciples ask the risen Lord when he will restore the kingdom to Israel. Jesus replies, this restoration is an eschatological event. In Hebrews 13:19, the author hopes to be restored or returned by God to his addressees. God restored Jesus from death to life. All the more, God will be able to return the author to his addressees. From Greek philosophy and scripture to Christian authors. As we have seen, the term apocatastasis was used in the Greek in various senses related to the concept of restoration, restitution, reconstitution, reintegration, return, and in philosophy it was a Stoic cosmological theory, which Origen knew and criticized. In the Greek Bible, which is the main source of inspiration for Origen and the other fathers who supported the doctrine of universal salvation, the noun apocatastasis and the relevant verb are found in the Old and in the New Testament. As I set out to show now, in the Bible there are many, not only lexical, but also conceptual bases for the Christian doctrine of universal restoration and salvation. This view was supported by a number of patristic, medieval, modern, and contemporary authors, including many who are venerated as saints and recognized as orthodox, and also including many women. After Bardesian and Clement, both who fought Gnosticism and Marcionianism, let me just mention, for instance, St. Anthony, St. Pamphilus, martyr, Methodius of Olympus, Eusebius of Caesarea, Didymus of Alexandria, St. Macrina Jr., St. Gregory of Nyssa, St. Gregory Nazianzen, St. Evagrius Ponticus, Theodore of Tarsus, Theodore Mopsuestia, St. John of Jerusalem, the Tall Brothers, St. Melania, Rufinus of Aquileia, St. Jerome and Augustine, for many years of their lives. Cassian, according to some, to be distinguished, St. John Cassian and Cassian the Sabiot, St. Isaac of Nineveh, St. John de Liatha, Joseph Hazael, Stephen bar Sudhaili, Pseudo Dionysius, the Areopagite, Saint Maximus, the Confessor, John the Scot Erigena, Saint Julian of Norwich, Lady Anne Conway, Jane Lead, and many others, up to Saint Therese of Lisieux, Saint John Paul II, and those engaged in the contemporary debate. Most of these believers based their hope for universal salvation on the Bible. The doctrine of universal salvation on its Christian form, as I thoroughly argued elsewhere, entirely depends on Christ's work. It is not pluralism. Universal salvation is a Christian concept. So Scripture and Christian beliefs about Jesus are both core to the development of theology, of the theology of apocatastasis in the early church. But the role of philosophical notions of apocatastasis cannot be dismissed either, with respect not only to the Stoic doctrine, whose necessitarianism and infinite cyclicality Origen expressly criticized, as mentioned above, but also to Platonism, for while Plato himself did not believe in universal salvation. Later, Neoplatonists such as Macrobius did. Platonism in its Christianized form was indeed embraced by most of the fathers who supported universal salvation, first of all Origen, and provided them with a number of tenets to support it, including the critical idea of ontological non-substance of evil. I missed a "the" in there. Including the critical idea of the ontological non-substance of evil, which entails evil's ultimate vanishing, and ethical intellectualism. For if wrong moral choices come from a clouding over of intellectual sight, its illumination on the part of the Logos will not fail to bring about restoration. We shall explain and explore these ideas later in the book. Two main interrelated tenets are also shared by the Christian supporters of universal salvation. 1. A continuity between the present and the future life. In an uninterrupted process of education, God is the teacher and the father, who may use even drastic means to educate, but only in the interest of the pupil or child. 2. Any punishment inflicted by God is therapeutic and cathartic, not retributive and therefore not eternal. Having introduced some of the key terminology and ideas, we are now in a position to begin our journey. We will now do that by turning to the texts accepted by the Church as Holy Scripture. For it was here that many believers in the early Church found the basis for a larger hope, the hope that God will one day restore the whole creation through Christ to the good destiny for which He created it. And that, boys and girls, is the end of the introduction. Whew, that was a chunky introduction. Holy smokes. Jeepers. Wow. Sleeping? Wake up. Oh, should I read chapter 1 or should I put that in a new video and start fresh? I think I'll put that in a new video and start fresh. That would be a great way to organize this playlist because, the introduction video is kind of a lot of rambling, nothing of real substance. I mean, that introduction of the reading of this introduction, not the introduction video as a whole, but the reading of this introduction, I think, is pretty necessary. If you're unfamiliar with this book or, the author or the concept of universal salvation, is necessary going forward. It's almost a chapter 1, and you're kind of, missing. Well. Never mind. Had something to say. Unnecessary. Thanks for watching. Thanks for hanging out. Hit the subscribe button. And if you haven't already, I don't know how many videos are up in this playlist at the time you're watching this video. But if there's more than one, you can actually go to the playlists on this channel, search either A Case for Christian Universalism, because all of these videos will be in there, or the playlist entitled A Larger Hope, Ilaria Ramelli. Playlist actually probably starts out with the term reading because I'm reading the whole book. Go to that playlist, push play all, and then you don't have to screw around with searching for the next video in line or chapter 2 or whatever. It'll start with chapter. Actually, you know what? I think YouTube is kind of backwards. So if I put out 30 videos all in a playlist, chapter 1 through 30. I don't know how many chapters are in this book, but it's going to start chapter 30 first and then work backwards because the chapter 30 will be the newest video in line. I think. I'm not. Nope. I'm wrong. My bad. Sorry. I just checked out a playlist the other day And it did start the playlist at the original first video, which is good. I think it actually, YouTube may have actually recently corrected that. For the reason of people reading books. You know, you want the topics in order. You know what I mean? If you're going to do like a 5-week series on something, you don't want to start the series on the 5th week. You want them in order. Anyway, there it is, guys. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. Thanks for hanging out. Hit the subscribe button. Drop a like, drop a comment, share this video in your Facebook news feed or wherever you are on social media, or text the link to a friend who thinks universalism is a joke, you know? Yeah, I may not be the most scholarly, debate-worthy, articulate idiot on the planet, but put him in the right place to actually stick around and listen to something legit, you know? I mean, it's up to you. At the end of the day, my goal here is I want to try and up the subscriber game so the channel gets out to more people, because when I came, sorry, I'm going to try not to smack the microphone and do so much moving around because you're probably hearing all those background noises. When I came into this flow, circle, river, journey, whatever, Christian universalism, there were very few resources available online. Now, there were some, but they were not easy to find. They're out there. But if you're going from typical Americanized Christian, you know, whether it's charismatic, evangelical, Protestant, Catholic, whatever you are, you know, and you've been jaded or hurt by the church, or you're simply like starting to think for yourself and you're wondering like, oh, what about this and this and this in the Bible? Like a Lutheran friend of mine who's actually a Lutheran pastor who walked away from the Lutheran church because he had questions himself, and the, you know, his higher-ups in the organization didn't have answers for him. He turned to the Orthodox Church, and they had the answers. Now, the Eastern Orthodox Church is definitely going to be the closest to the original when it comes to early church doctrines, dogmas, whatever. Maybe not so much dogmas, but definitely doctrines. That said, I don't personally think the Eastern Orthodox Church does church the way it was intended, because I don't think church was intended to be a ceremonial, ritualistic, you know, traditional practice in the means or in the way that it is. I think it was literally like the best, most real form of a church service would be like going to a family reunion or going to a barbecue and just hanging out with your family. And outreaches and helping the needy and spreading good news of Jesus and the Father. And you know what I mean? Like, church was never intended. Okay, never mind. We're just going to stop it there. I could talk all day. I'm not going to. Thanks for watching. Episode introduction. I was going to say episode 1, but it ain't episode 1. It's episode introduction to A Larger Hope, Universal Salvation from Christian Beginnings, to Julian of Norwich. If you stuck around to the end of this video, I was going to say I was going to buy you a Ferrari, but I'm not there yet. So hit the subscribe button so this video will get out to more people. The channel will get out to more people, which in turn will give me a chance to be more heavily and thoroughly criticized by more people, because people will be dropping comments like, you're an idiot. And I'll have a chance to say, no, you're an idiot. Or maybe we'll just have a civilized conversation instead and go to sources. Or maybe I'll ignore it all and just do more videos. Either way, it's been great. Thanks for hanging out. I'm going to click my little clicker now. Stay tuned. Hit that bell. That's what you got to do. Hit the bell. The bell is going to notify you when my next video comes out. Thanks for watching. Appreciate y'all. Taste and see that the Lord is good.